What's up? I'm Andrew from the band Ripped to Shreds, and today we are talking about producing vocals for the traditional heavy metal band Serpent. They play doomy heavy metal with unconventional, soaring, clean vocals in the style of Wrathblade, or Reverend Bizarre, or even Rotting Christ. I reamped the guitars and bass, sample replaced the drums, and also flew to Seattle to assist in producing the vocal recording. Our goal wasn't to emulate any one particular album or even era of heavy metal, but make something that sounded powerful and timeless. The new album is out today on No Remorse Records, and this is the song Tyrant's March from their album The Ichor of Chimera.
The kingdom and the power and the glory evermore. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory evermore. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory evermore.
So our pre-production for this recording session started several months prior, where I had Riza record home demos of all her parts for the songs. We also created MIDI guide tracks for all the vocals. Shout out Jeff Black from Glyph and Gatekeeper for suggesting it. Sometimes bands may forget that when they walk into the recording studio, the engineers are not going to be familiar in any way with what the music is supposed to sound like. Especially when different instruments are recorded at different studios with different engineers. No one engineer has the full picture of what any of the songs are. So having the MIDI piano track gave me and the recording engineers an objective reference for melodies, and it also assisted Riza with staying on pitch, and we could hone in on delivery and energy instead of worrying about pitch accuracy. And then after the recording is all done, it also prevents the engineers from tuning the vocals to the wrong melodies, which is something that is super common. You end up having to go back and forth a few times to fix things. We spent 2 days in Seattle at Magic Mix Studio recording vocals. Since I don't really have much experience with recording these types of clean vocals, my role as a producer was ensuring that we got good energy and delivery in the takes, as well as suggesting alternate melodies or arrangements. The heavy lifting of the engineering work, including the vocal tuning, was done by the house engineers. We recorded through, I believe, a Josephson C705 large diaphragm condenser into a distressor, and I think some hardware EQs. We shot out like a bunch of different microphones, including like a vintage U87, but we all agreed that the Josephson was one that sounded the best with Riza's voice. And Magic Mix had several different spaces, including like a big live room. You could fit maybe like a 15-piece brass band in there, and a whole bunch of like isolation booths. And we tried recording in the larger live room, but Riza felt like the most comfortable in the isolated vocal booths. Especially with vocals, the sound of the room is a huge factor. And if we solo out the vocal tracks without any processing, we can hear that it does sound like a small closed booth like this.
Eternal power, most hallowed be thine goal. Almighty, hallowed, self-consecrated, burning vitality.
Especially when you're dealing with something as delicate as sung vocals, the performance is more important than any marginal improvement of recording quality. Even if, like a space is like 5% or even 10% worse than another space, if the vocalist feels more comfortable recording there, that's what you do. Or, if a microphone, the correct way, right, for a microphone is on a stand with a pop filter and the vocalist is standing 7 or 8 inches back so there's no proximity effect. If they're very used to holding like a 58 in their hand on stage, and that's how they deliver their best performance, that's what you're going to go with. You can kind of fix less ideal sound, but you can't fix a bad performance or bad energy, especially in vocals. You can also hear that there's a lot of grit and distortion baked into the recording. This is coming from the distressor.
I am but a soldier, no body sattva, yet solar embers burn in me. We are the demiurgic legions, the providential cosmic soul.
So Riza is not like a gritty singer. Her voice is very light and airy, and I'm not sure if pure is the right way, but it's not like a Axl Rose or Bon Jovi where when they sing there's a lot of grit in their voice. Part of what helps her voice cut through guitars and the drums is going to be distortion. The distressor is a very popular hardware compressor that has certain character. Really, it distorts in a pleasing way when you push it. That's part of what people like so much about the distressor. The other thing about recording with compressor on the way in is that all these are already very even in level. So one of the biggest tasks that I have as a mixer when I get these tracks is I need to go through and clip gain everything, chop up all the vocals, clip gain, make sure they're all consistent and level, and then I can start processing them. But a lot of that heavy lifting has already been done by the distressor. So you can see that for the entire album, there's only maybe a few places where I had to hit it with clip gain. But there's still a decent amount of automation for controls the level of the vocal after it's been processed. Some things that we tried here that I normally would never do with an extreme metal recording, we triple tracked some of these vocals, and that so that's just her vocal soloed but louder. And then here it is with triple track. So we recorded 3 takes, took 2 of the takes and panned them hard left and right, and then 1 straight down the center. This part sort of functions as like the chorus of this song, and it sounds a lot more polished than using, some kind of automatic double tracker or, just throwing a chorus plugin on it. Using triple tracking like this is also just another way we try to build dynamics out of all the songs. And I have to say, Riza has a really sick musical ear. There are some sections where I suggested that she harmonize with herself, but the band hadn't written any harmonies. So me and Brandon were like in there, dicking around on the piano or the guitar, trying to find an appropriate harmony line. And we wasted like 10 minutes trying to do that. But Riza was just like, okay, I can hear it in my head. I'm just going to go straight in there and sing it. And then she nailed it. If I remember correctly, it's... as a producer, you also need to be able to suggest things and and argue for what you want, even if the band is not sold on it. But you also need to know when to step back and trust the band. One part that I'm particularly proud of, I'm a little bit biased, is this big hymnal choir type thing in Tyrant's March. Because originally, it was just like that. But I was like, with all the buildup, we have to make this part stand out. It's going to be the centerpiece of the song. And Serpent Rider is not, like a symphonic type band. We're not going to get in there with a whole bunch of keyboards and strings, orchestral synths to thicken it up. I know, like, Jeff Black does a lot of that type of work. If they send him some band and they're like, okay, we want you to sweeten this record up, that's what he'll do. He'll add in those kinds of fills and harmonies and little keyboard parts to give things like a boost. I know Brandon can pull this off live, and I know they were talking about, hey, okay, maybe we should have multiple people singing backup vocals live. And I already knew they were having these kinds of discussions. So I was like, okay, Brandon, just get in there, sing, and we'll turn it into this big, big part. And then, so of course he went in there, he nailed it, and it came out really great. So I'm really happy with that bit. And I think this part on Hero's Spirit, which is kind of like I would call it like a lament, like a solo lament. It's very atypical for traditional heavy metal or power metal, but I think it's one of the most unique songs on this record. This call and response bit, if I remember correctly, originally they had the melody just repeated. And then the next section, it would just be the same thing, and it would repeat on and on. I was like, okay, I like the idea. It's a little bit repetitive. How do we spice it up? So then I was like, okay, on the second one, why don't you go high instead of keeping it at the same pitch? So I think that section and Tyrant's March are kind of sections where I really stuck my fingers in. I was like, okay, guys, what if we do this instead of just having it the way it was? That's really a matter of trust between a band and the producer. Because if they didn't believe that I understood what they were trying to do with the album, they'd be like, fuck off. Why are you trying to tell us how to do things? I'm very glad that they trusted me enough to let me make those kinds of suggestions. As for mixing, there's not really much special that I did, because it already came to me sounding great. The engineers at Magic Mix Studios are total professionals. They know what they're doing. So really, on my end, all I did was just smash it even harder through LA2A and put some reverb on it. I want to take a second to talk about tuning, vocal tuning. In a genre that prizes authenticity and doing things the hard way or the real way, tuning is like a bad word for a lot of fans or musicians. But for me, from first principles, I don't believe there is even such a thing as authenticity in recorded music, given that the act of recording, mixing, and then reproducing that music on speakers played at home or on headphones is a fundamentally totally different act from watching a live band. You could nail a vocal in one take, or it might take you 50 takes to get the right one, or you might chop up those 50 takes and just piece it together word by word or even syllable by syllable. And the only person who would know the difference is the people who did it, not the listener. And so I don't think any of those methods are any more real than the other. If you want to record a video and you mime it to that perfect edited track, that's like trivial. No one's going to know. I think trying to look for proof that they did it the right way is like a fool's errand. There's just so many reasons why you would take advantage of vocal tuning. So during the recording process, it gives you so much flexibility. The singer is trying to focus on nailing the emotion and the vibe. And then, if there's a couple of spots that are pitchy, that's no problem. The take's still a good take. And especially when it comes to vocals and drums, the confidence of the performer is so important. And you want to work as fast as possible, and you want to minimize the number of takes. Especially for vocals, you want to prevent them from getting tired or blowing out their voice. For drums, there's more leeway. It's a lot easier to fix a bad drum performance than it is to fix a shitty... you can't really fix a shitty vocal performance in terms of emotion and energy. Beyond that, tuning vocals has really existed since the dawn of tape recording. With Verispeed, you just speed it up, slow it down to change the pitch of the vocal. And you can even, engineers have even, they just put their finger on the tape machine to target just when that pitchy note comes in. They put their finger on the tape to slow it down and change the pitch while they're dumping it to the master tape. Also, there's a lot of popular true heavy metal bands from the last 15 or so years. I cannot name them because it would make a lot of my friends very angry, but I think they would have really benefited from tuning their vocals, because when I listen to them, I can hear, okay, this part is just not on pitch. It's not sung right. It's really a necessary step in making a good sounding record with sung vocals. Unless your desire is to purposely sound like you're making a very raw, at-home kind of demo, or if you have, a literal world-class singer. For instance, the vocals that I got from Mark Bowles, I didn't tune them, and I can hear that he didn't tune them either. But he's good enough that it doesn't matter that we didn't tune his vocals. But 99% of bands aren't going to work with a singer that's that good. And it's like the same thing. It's the same thing with drums. The best drummers in the world don't need editing to make them sound consistent, but 99% of bands are not going to be working with world-class drummers. And I think we're all just trying to make cool sounding records. So anything goes when we're trying to make the cool sounding records. Let's take a quick look at some of the other instruments on the record. I remember we had to do the guitars a couple of times. I had to reamp them a couple of. And that's really my error for not, insisting that we figure out the guitar tone at the very start. So I guess the band didn't have a strong idea of how they wanted everything to sound together. They're like, okay, we just wait till the end. We wait till everything's recorded, and then we'll figure it out from there. And so then it took a lot of, maybe there's not enough gain, maybe there's too much gain, it doesn't sound right, and then a lot of back and forth. Whereas if we just decided from day one, this is how we want it to sound, it would have been a lot easier to nail that right away. I believe I have a whole bunch of amps back here. I believe I used the Marshall DSL. I used this one. It's a Joyo Ultimate Drive. It's like a clone of the Fulltone OCD. And really I use either that or my Tube Screamer clone for boosting amps. Yeah, and I put reverb on there just because very modern power metal records, the guitars are very dry. You need to go back to like the 80s or the 70s, and they're going to have a little bit of reverb on the guitar, on rhythm guitars. Mostly, I think guitar lines weren't as busy back then. You don't have like the palm muted chugging, which can sound really washy with reverb. But Dawkins gets away with it. But yeah, so we wanted to avoid making them sound super dry and modern. Bass. Amps and plugins are something I generally don't use very often because the people who are designing these amps and plugins and designing the cabinet simulation and cabinet IRs and captures or signal chain captures are usually very much modern metal type folks like Jens Bogren or Kola Keller. The way they're designed is going to sound a certain way that I don't vibe with. And I personally get results that make me happy when I mic up a real cab with my own mics. That's only for rhythm guitar. For bass, I find it a lot easier amp sim for bass. Sometimes I don't even use an amp sim. I just crush it with a compressor and a bit of distortion. This Kurt Ballou STL Tone Hubs pack had some nice sounding, slightly less aggressively distorted bass sounds that I liked, and we just went with it. For drums, they were recorded over 2 days at a different studio in Washington. I didn't attend those sessions. If I had, I would have had them change the tuning of the snare because it was very loose and splatty, and I just didn't find it that pleasant to listen to. And normally I wouldn't fully replace a snare. Like, kicks have very little dynamics to begin with, and when it's buried under a wall of guitars and bass, no one's going to notice that it's the same kick sound being repeated over and over. So I have no issues with blasting the kick with a one-shot sample. But snares are tricky, especially in extreme metal, where you've got blast beats, you've got these crazy fills all over the place. And if you're using like a bad one-shot sample, it's just going to sound really shitty. You know, like Superior Drummer, which is what I use. It's a lot easier to get a totally realistic sounding performance when the snare is like playing backbeats and little ghost notes and not constant smacking the snare. But of course, you still need to put in good amount of work to actually make it sound right. I was pretty happy with the sound of the overheads. And the toms sounded good to me too. So I have no complaints about those. Just the snare and the kick. The kick rarely ever sounds good to me. For a lot of mixers, I think we're going to kind of automatically assume that the kick sounds bad and replace it with a sample. You know, I had a lot of fun working on this record. It was like a totally different type of record for me to do. And I think we made something that sounded pretty cool. Yeah, so I think especially a lot of the vocal lines that Reza came up with for the record, totally alien to traditional heavy metal or US power metal. I think this album is really unique. I think it's sick. I think we did a great job. So, down below, you will find links to their Bandcamp, to No Remorse's store, all that good shit. Check them out, and I'll see you guys next time.